I'm Rob Kazmierski. I'm in Morristown, New Jersey. I have an uncle who was an orthodontist, and I was in dental school because that's just what I was going to do. And he convinced me that it was both fun and a low stress field in orthodontics. And later, after prodding, he admitted that he lied about the low stress part. Orthodontics to me is primarily number one, a way of helping the oral health of patients and also their psychological health. Patients, there's not an orthodontist out there who hasn't seen the joy in a patient's face when we take the braces off and they look in the mirror for the first time. That sometimes makes the whole trip worthwhile. I think the answer is probably pretty much the same, that we benefit the oral health of society, we benefit the psychological health of society, and it's how we contribute. Um, that I went to the University of Pittsburgh undergraduate, and my undergraduate degree is in philosophy. And there aren't too many of us out there every year. I think Pitt graduates somewhere around 35,000 people, and an average of 35 to 50 of them are philosophy majors. So there's very few of us out there, though there are a few. And I think it influences a lot of what I write and what I do. I thought about that one, and I'm going back to an article that I can't really cite at the moment, and it might have been published in the JCO, and they looked at total time duration to treat patients, and they found that the ones that take the absolute most amount of time were asymmetric cases, which actually surprised me. And I have thought about it. They didn't come up with the reason why. I think maybe it's because we have a tendency to underestimate what's going on with these asymmetric cases, that there's actually underlying skeletal asymmetries that we don't think about. But that said, I mean, the usual culprits will be open bite patients, class 3 patients. For myself, open bite patients, yes, they're difficult to treat, but usually you see them. You know you've got an issue, you've got some type of bead. For the class 3 patients, most frustrating part about those is just the tendency for latent class 3 growers. There's not a one of us that's been out there for a while that you treat somebody, you struggle, you cross the finish line, everything's class 1, Hugh, we made it, and 3-4 years later they come back, they're edge to edge or underbite. It's not our average patient, but it's there. It's very frustrating. So many that I'll lump them all together into what I'll just call the digital revolution. It's affected pretty much everything. First, it took away our paper ledgers when we started to track patients that way, and then it took a huge burden off of scheduling when we were able to schedule from any computer in the office instead of having one schedule sheet. To now digital charting has taken loads off of writing the individual notes for every patient. And now we're starting to see it go into all sorts of different ways, including online learning, which I think is going to be a profound difference for all of us if it hasn't been already. So predicting what's 10 years out, this is going to be really accurate. My prediction is that I think that the corporate, the OSO takeovers is going to have maxed out. I think it's going to probably have some type of equilibrium. Bill Lehman has, in the latest JCO article, at least in November, said that some 40% of DSOs are already in some form of financial trouble. So I think we're starting to see that exponential curve level out. I think that the remote monitoring, I'm not a big remote monitoring proponent, but if you can excuse the analogy, I'm going back to when the first microwave that I bought. They would advertise that you could cook your entire meal in it. And literally, you could buy cookbooks where you would cook your chicken from beginning to end. Now, maybe we'll reheat something in there, but not one of us wants to eat a piece of chicken that's been cooked from beginning to end in a microwave oven. And I think with remote monitoring, that probably is going to happen. That just like microwaves, we don't use them for their original intention, but they definitely, it's something all of us want in our kitchens for use occasionally. I think remote monitoring really almost hasn't found its niche yet. That it's going to find a place, maybe something that we haven't thought of. And lastly, of course, I think AI is really going to dramatically affect us more than any of us are thinking of right now. I like to write, and I started out, getting involved online with, used to be something called the Electronic Study Club for Orthodontics out of Loyola. We're going way back. And then somehow that evolved into OrthoTown was the next best thing. And now a lot of the online Facebook groups seems to be where it's at. And because I like to write, I just push a lot of, I don't want to say publications, posts there. And Neil, honestly, I guess, recognized me and saw some of my posts, and I guess he liked them, and we became some form of interaction. And so I know that I had Neil in my corner, and then he said that there were a few other people that were pushing for me, but he never shared who. So I whoever you are, thank you, but I don't know who you are. Neil has never said. And then on a Sunday out barbecuing, and he had become head editor for, I don't know, a month or two or something. And he calls me and invited me to join. And I don't think I hesitated for a second. I said, yes, I'd love to. And there was a good meal out on the deck. So, well, I've got two of them going so far. The first is just coming up with something, an idea, a question that we can find, first off, that people will be interested in, and second off, that there might be a variety of opinions that all are legitimate and of interest to other readers. Next is phrasing the questions and correctly, and getting the statistics down and working with you to get that all correct. And last, I guess, is going through the multitude of answers that people give. And what I try to do, or have tried to do, is give the spectrum. So even if I don't agree with it, if it's on this end, I want at least one comment on that end. And if I do agree with it, I don't want to try and bias it and put a whole bunch of comments in there and try to fill in between and not make the whole thing too long. The tough part is sometimes people come up with some really creative answers and things that you just don't think about, or I didn't think about. And you want to include that, but without adding too much in there. So. I think that a number of the questions probably this will answer, so I hate to get it all up in one. I will share that when I first graduated from residency, we had the free journals sitting around, and I did not subscribe. And it was one of my first jobs. I was an associate up in Red Hill, Pennsylvania for somebody, and we got to talking. He's like, well, what do you do to stay current? And he told me, he says, without a doubt, he says, don't not subscribe to the JCO. He says, you absolutely have to subscribe to this. This is the only thing that's going to keep you current. And so for, I'll say, 34 and a half years of my 35 years, I have subscribed straight to the JCO. And I think it's absolutely necessary if we're going to stay current. I guess I suppose I have to give close to the same answer. And again, I don't want to get ahead too much on some of maybe what might coming down the pike as other questions. I think the JCO occupies a very unique niche in orthodontics, and I'll compare it to perhaps the AJO or Progress in Orthodontics or European Journal of Orthodontics. And those are really, really excellent peer-reviewed research journals. And you know, the first Larry Andrews' first articles came out in AJO. And those journals, in the fact that they are research oriented, will change the theory of why we do things. They will change the theory of why we may or may not use functional appliances or certain things. But JCO will change clinically what we do with patients, which is an entirely different world. It's going to affect the day-to-day nuts and bolts of what we use, what appliances we use, what tricks we know, and that we're all on the same tree. But I think JCO definitely occupies a different section of that tree, and a very unique section. To my knowledge, there's no other journal that does that. Oh boy. First off, I love the Facebook groups. I love the internet. I love internet learning. There is no question that it has made me a better orthodontist. I can go out there and post something or read posts and get like tons of, we used to, you know, we used to sit in our offices alone, and once a year or twice a year we'd go to a big meeting, and finally you get to interact with people. And now you can interact with other orthodontists all day long if you want. But the difference is there's that is unfiltered information, and you have to always keep that in mind, that the entire spectrum is there. There's a lot of good information there, but there's a lot of bad information out there too. There's a lot of false information, and there's a lot of biased information. The bias is perhaps the worst part of it, because that is sometimes the preponderance of information in a certain direction. And if you say, well, 90% of the posts that I read say this, okay, but that doesn't mean it's right. That just means that it's sponsored. There's a KOL out there pushing it. Maybe that 10% is accurate in this. And through the peer review process, you filter it down to at least, hey, we've had some legitimate orthodontists read this, go through it, and this is at least worth publishing, it worth reading, worth considering. So I think that's a tremendous difference between a peer-reviewed journal and what we're getting online. Not that online is not valuable. So, oh God, there's so much. The clinical pearls. I thought about this and I couldn't even do it. I remember one of the first things I started doing was painting the facial surfaces, entire facial surface of the teeth with filled resin, light cure, to help prevent decalcifications. That was 34 years ago. Ravi Nanda's articles on protraction headgear. I kind of followed exactly what he recommended at the time. You can go back to Tom Mulligan's. I mean, these are all classic things from way back. Biomechanics series, probably all of which are worth going back and rereading for the subscribers. I think those are still available, are they not? Yes. So there's just so much in there. For all of the above reasons, it's that I think now more than ever, there's so much information out there. We can get so much. But we really need something reliable that's unbiased, that has been, it's going to be new. Neil's doing a really good job of that, putting some of the newer concepts and ideas out there, but also filtering out maybe what shouldn't be in print and what shouldn't be online and isn't really worthy of consideration. And there's no other journal that does exactly what it does. There's a few non-peer-reviewed journals that do that, and you will, to be honest, find some good articles in those. But you'll also find a lot that does not belong in print, that has no research justification, that would never make it through the peer review process. Basically, some sponsor is taking out enough ads so whatever their KOL says is going to make it in. You're not going to find that in the JCO. It at least makes it through the peer review process, and is at least worthy of consideration, whether you agree with it or not. So. I thought about that about 30 seconds, and I have a quick, easy answer for you. I wish 35 years ago that I had known that in 35 years, there's not a single patient that I have extracted teeth on that I later have regretted extracting teeth on. Not one. I have occasionally wished that I had extracted different teeth, maybe a second buy instead of a first, or a first buy instead of a second, but never in 35 years once have I regretted extracting on a patient. Don't get comfortable. No matter how successful you are, no matter how stable you are, it's going to change. In 35 years, I thought we at the beginning that we'd seen so much change. We had gone from, there were still a few practitioners doing standard brackets, and we were all state of the art using prescription brackets, and this is it. This is how it's going to be. My gosh, there's so much that's changed, and I don't think that's going to stop. I don't think you can get comfortable. I think you have to stay on top of things and always keep your thumb on the pulse of what's happening. Find a mentor. I was very fortunate that I did not practice. I practiced for him for a while, but then it was remotely, and then it was completely separately. But I happened to have somebody who was very well trained, that I was able to use as a mentor, and I think it's just invaluable. We all, the old cliche is that enjoy your first 2 years of practice, because that's the only time in your life you're going to be the best orthodontist there is. And we all think that. We graduate, we have all this knowledge, we know all the latest things, and 2 years later, all of a sudden, the braces aren't coming off those patients. And there's certain problems with them that we never thought we would have. And I think it can be invaluable to have someone that you can go to, and say, look, I'm just having a real problem in this case. Do you mind looking at it and going over it with me? I think that's huge value to anybody. I'm going to feed right off of that one, because that one really is probably a major change. I was never a non-extractionist, but I've definitely gone more that way. Especially for residents or just anybody, the answer would be, the borderline extraction patient is an extraction patient. And if you find yourself struggling in a class 2 or getting transverse or something like that, go back and look at your original diagnosis and see if this was not a borderline extraction patient that you really pushed the other way. I think a lot of the times we get into trouble, especially with the push for non-extraction, is sometimes that creates a world of hurt for us. And I think that is the cause of a lot of our problems.